Hello, everybody. Richard C. Wilson here with Billionaires.com as part of our 100 Billionaire interview series. And today we have with us Serge Bell, also known as SB. Serge is a tech entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. He's founded dozens of IT and technology companies, venture capital funds, and science education centers around that theme. Born into a family of physicists, and in 1993, he moved to Singapore, where he became a citizen just about 25 years ago now. And he's emerged as a prominent entrepreneur in the Singapore area and really globally in the area of technology. He holds a BS and a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a Master's in Physics and Electrical Engineering and a PhD in Computer Science. SB, welcome to Billionaires.com, and I'm happy to have you here as part of the interview series.
I'm very glad to be here. Very much happy to answer questions in such a prestigious place like Billionaire podcast.
Excellent. Well, let's get right into it then. I want to start by asking you, what was the major turning point or the real point of increased momentum or a strategic choke point that you once acquired or completed that just made everything surge forward after that? For some people, it might be a resource, it might be an asset, it might be a company you acquired. When you look back, is there any one moment where everything changed after that one event?
If you ask me about what is a main choke point, I usually don't really think about business activity as a place for one thing. You know, that may happen with gambling. So if you go and gamble in a casino, you can sort of make a right bet. But business is much more like poker or even bridge, where you play a long series of cards in many places with many people, and there is not any one particular place where you win. You win by making a lot of decisions over time. And as I'm involved in business for 33 years, and unfortunately, I have been not super focused. So I've been involved in a number of companies over that time and built a number of companies. And so there is always a different context, and there is always different circumstances, and there is always different important events. So there's not a one event which I can point out. And the only one thing which is maybe to remember is that most of the business is based on opportunities which are created by the outside world. And so you have to rely on these opportunities and not miss the opportunities, such as changes in geopolitical landscape, changes in economic, changes in technology, changes in science. And these changes enable you to make new things. So new things are not created from your head, but created by the world, and you can just tag along and ride on it. And so this is the thing. Too long.
No, it's fine. Long answers are great. Sometimes we have very short answers to some of our interview questions, and we really don't mind a more lengthy answer. It just provides more context and more value for everybody listening to the interview. So let's move on to my second question. What's the most valuable strategy that's worth far more than $1 million that you can provide us with here today that you wish somebody maybe had mentioned to you earlier on in your career?
If you ask me about the most valuable strategy, especially in the context of this interview, I have to think about contracts and legal documents and corporate documents and all different things which surround business activity and social activity. All of us actually are involved in touching many parts of the constitutions of many countries and many different regulations. And all of us always have to participate as a party in multi-party contracts of some sorts, whether it's an employment contracts or customer and partner contracts or shareholder agreements or bylaws or stock purchase agreements and or equity agreements or credit card agreements, service level agreements. So there is like we're surrounded by agreements. And these agreements are rarely enforced. directly. More often than not, they are enforced psychologically, but people tend to not spend enough time and enough effort and enough qualifications to be able to deal with these agreements. And as we move from the world where the text was relatively hard to create, say 1,000 years ago, you had very few agreements, to the time when you can very easily generate agreements where each of us surrounded by thousands of agreements. And that's exactly why things like Aracor could be useful, because the most valuable advice is to use good legal advisors and to read your agreements and to understand the nature of your agreements, but practically doing and following this advice for a modern executive or modern entrepreneur or modern investor is very difficult because of the number of agreements and complexity of the agreements. They do play an important role, and they do quite often limit your ability to get to upside and even create situations where you fall into downside, but you cannot read them in full. And so with generative AI, luckily, we can do much better, and we can automate this legal and regulatory and compliance and such other texts and frameworks much better. And so the most valuable advice is to have good lawyers and to have good way and to read your agreements.
Thank you. What I'm going to do now is ask an extra question about Aracos, because I want to make sure and explain kind of what it is and what the AI technology does. I believe it's designed to support legal counsel and in-house legal teams. Can you elaborate more on that and what it does exactly and the role you're playing in it?
Yeah, so Aracor, we started Aracor as idea several years ago, based on the considerations that AI, which is now more often called generative AI, would allow to automate intelligent processing of texts, checking text for certain patterns, certain logical concepts and structures. And we were thinking that it is absolutely necessary to automate and improve our ability to deal with legalities and legal documents, and generative AI shall help it. And to some extent, we were very lucky because we started sort of pre-Gen AI, and by the time that Gen AI became such a huge trend, we already had a lot of understanding of what needs to be done and how this needs to be automated. And all Aracor really does, it allows the lawyers to focus on important topics and automate all of the topics which are reasonably mechanical and repeatable with the use of generative AI, and as such to do much better work and much faster on legal documents. So intelligence part of the work stays in the hands of the legal experts, but the repeatable part of work, such as document markup or due diligence or corrections of the documents or comparisons of the documents or possible simulation of possible outcomes, can all be done by AI. Of course, when you do something like this, you have to think about privacy, you have to think about security, you have to think about compliance, you have to think about ability for the legal advisors to keep their individuality and to keep their control of how they deal with documents. And you have to think about collaboration. Almost no legal processes today, or even including creating documents and signing contracts, involve a single person. It's almost always multiple people on every side. Even in case there is two sides, you're talking about 3 to 5 people. But typically it could be even 50 people working on the same set of documents in case of large transactions. And so there is a lot of things which need to be done to make it possible, but Gen AI enables it. And that's what Aracor is a software application enabled by Gen AI to help lawyers to be more efficient and more effective.
Great, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I'll end with this last question, which is, what is the number one most costly mistake that you have made or seen other investors or founders make that could easily be avoided just by somebody listening to your insights and your suggestions here today?
I think people are afraid of complications, and as being afraid of complications is more common than not to not do sufficient diligence. We live in the world of generalizations where we think of about universal leaders, universal strategies, universal trends, universal um, cultural values, universal languages, and blah, blah, blah. In reality, everything is context specific. Different leaders, as it was pointed out even more than 500 years ago by Niccolo Machiavelli, are good for different contexts, for example. And one of the things you do as an investor and as an entrepreneur is constantly choose people in your business partners, in your investors, in your board members, but mostly people who are your executives and at some point chief executives. And most costly mistakes are always about choosing the wrong person. Now, you would ask, how would you choose the wrong person if you have done choosing people many, many times? And you do that by not doing enough diligence of the context in which the person needs to work and of the context in which person was working. Leaders are not universal, and some leaders are good for a period of high change. Some leaders are good for a period of low change. Those are different skills. And so the most important thing is to do diligence. Diligence on people, diligence on documents, diligence on partners.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here and speaking with me. And hopefully we'll have you come and speak at one of our events here soon. Take care.